I'm Dr. Dan Cox, a professor of counseling psychology at the University of British Columbia, and welcome to Psychotherapy and Applied Psychology, where we explore practical insights with leading experts. Today, I am thrilled to welcome back Dr. Tony Rousmaniere, a world authority on how to become a better therapist. In this conversation, we dig into the role of AI in therapy, my guest's amazing experience establishing a new therapist training school, and what might be the most important thing that we can do, which is to change our culture around therapist training and improvement. I had so much fun having this conversation, and I really think that this guy and his colleagues are onto something. And a large part of me thinks that we need to blow up traditional training models and target the deliberate practice ideals that these folks are espousing. And please feel free to leave a comment below. And if you enjoy this conversation, it'd be much appreciated if you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This episode starts with Dr. Rousmaniere talking about people using artificial intelligence as their therapists. Let's jump in.
I am staying optimistic. There's something, have you heard of Jevons paradox?
Huh.
Jevons paradox is a term that refers, I think it goes back to when the steam engine was originally developed. And there are all these concerns like, oh my gosh, they're making all these machines that are part of the Industrial Revolution, and they're going to take all these jobs away from human beings. And there's going to be no jobs left. And while there was a period of disruption that went on for a little while, what they found over time is actually 100 times more jobs were invented.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when the internal combustion engine was invented. It did put a lot of the horse-drawn carriage riders out of business. But then there's all these taxi companies and bus companies and transportation companies. And, there's 100 times more jobs are created. I think that will happen from AI. I think ChatGPT and the other AI providers will actually provide enough limited emotional support to get people open and interested in the idea of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think human therapists, I even have to qualify therapists as human.
Right.
I think human therapists will be on a treatment team with AI therapists. And AI will provide things that we can't provide, like being available at 2 a.m., like being available 7 days a week for almost free.
Mm-hmm.
And then the human therapist will provide the thing that AI can't provide, which is being human.
Right. All right. Yeah. Huh. So, since we there are a couple things I want to get to.
Sorry, I took us off on a tangent.
No, this is great. I have a ton of questions. I've asked almost none, but I feel like this is great. Yeah. Okay. So I want to get back to Centio, but
Yes.
before we do that, let's do that real fast, and then I want to get into. We've talked a lot about training.
Yes.
I want to get into more for the people who are already in practice.
Yes.
So let's hold off on that if that's okay, and let's get back to Centio real fast. So, okay, I totally get this as like the idea of it. I totally see the importance, the value of it.
Yeah.
But actually putting into practice, there's a big there's a chasm between this is a great idea.
Yes.
We have some people who could facilitate it to actually making this happen.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, like, how did you get? I mean, frankly, you had to get funding for it.
Yes.
Which was huge. And then I'm sure there are a lot of people who put in a lot of effort on the front end with no financial remuneration at all.
Correct.
So so you had to have a group of people who are really motivated. Let's just put that to the side because you just had to have that, right? How did you get funding for it? Why did you decide California, which has to be the worst state in the nation in terms of bureaucracy and red tape for both becoming licensed, for I'm sure it applies to their education system as well, and becoming and then why MFT? So anyway, so that's my rambling.
I'll summarize it. I could talk about this for hours, but it would bore everyone. But I'll say what we discovered is that it is effectively not allowed to start a new therapy graduate school in any state except for California.
Really?
Yeah. Now they don't say that.
I would never guess that.
They don't say that. It's not it's not like there's a law you are not allowed to start a new graduate school. However, every other state except California says if you want to run a graduate school, it has to be accredited by a national accreditation agency. And you can only get accreditation if you've been running for 3+ years. So in effect, you're not allowed to start a new graduate school. And it's just not allowed. And the only state that lets you do that is California. You can get approval from the California regulator, and they will let you operate. And we got approval from them
which I'm sure was an insane amount of work.
About 500 pages of paperwork, and it took about 2.5 years of mostly waiting. And we got that done, and now we're operating, and now we're going through the accreditation process, which will let us operate in all the other states.
So that's like accrediting it as an educational institution.
Yeah, we have approval in California, and we are in the process of getting accredited for all the other states, which is it's designed to be a long process. The first stage takes approximately 3 or so years. The next stage will take approximately 5 years. So the whole thing will be over 10 years before, we're a fully accredited school. So our currently we only accept students who want to work in California.
Is it brick and mortar?
No, it's it's a mixed, it's a hybrid. So we have online courses, and then we have in-person residencies, which are these intensive week-long residencies where students meet. And so it's a mix of the two.
Okay. So they're doing then a lot of their practices and stuff online.
Yes. And all the client sessions are online as well through the Centio Counseling Center. Centio Counseling Center is our online clinic or practicum site, also known as an internship, where students see psychotherapy clients that are adults. We specialize in serving clients with trauma, and we provide very low fee, accessible therapy for people who frankly couldn't afford therapy otherwise.
Where did the names? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to ask where the name Centio came from.
Centio is Latin for to think or perceive or feel.
Okay.
And we just thought it was a good name.
Yeah. So then why MFT instead of?
So I mean, this gets pretty thick in the weeds, but each professional association has their own rules and various requirements and that kind of thing. We felt that the MFT degree would grant us the most flexibility to, can I be blunt? It would grant us if someone is listening from another professional association, please fast forward 10 minutes. Don't listen to what I'm about to say. But the rules for most of these professional associations are heavily focused on paperwork. It's like the accreditation rules. They're focused on proving effectiveness by measured in inches of paperwork. And as you know, you're going through the accreditation process.
Oh man!
It's very well intentioned. It's the great people that have very good intentions, and it does not do its job. It does not show. You have schools that students will complain are crappy schools, and they are fully accredited in every possible way. And because we all know, if you just throw enough money at lawyers, they will get you accredited. Like it's just a paperwork game. Yeah, and I hate to say it, but it's the case. We don't want to just be accredited. We actually want to provide very, very effective training for our students. And we thought the MFT degree had the most flexibility to because we're doing things in an unusual way. If you look at the slides for our classes, there's a lot of emphasis on skill rehearsal, where typically there would be more didactic lecture and the academic stuff. Now we do have academic stuff. We have very rigorous, there's reading, there's writing, there's exams, there's all the traditional academic stuff. But we thought the MFT degree would let us most focus on clinical competence. Mm-hmm. And then over time, we will add a counseling degree, we'll add a psychology degree, we'll add a social work degree, that kind of thing.
So as much as you feel comfortable talking about this, how did you get the money to do this?
We are fortunate to have found a generous donor who cares a lot about this cause and understands our mission. And the donor has kind of started us out with enough seed money to we have a runway for a number of years. So we could go for 10 years, before getting, which is what we think it'll take to get fully accredited. And, over time, school generates revenue. We're already generating revenue.
So you're in the black.
I wouldn't go that far. Okay. I wouldn't go that far. We're a startup. We're new. We're doing better financially than we expected at this stage.
I wouldn't expect you to be in.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, I would think that would take quite a while to get there.
Yeah, we have 10 years to get there. I think within 5 years we're going to be more than in the black. So we might even be there next year, in part because part of the reason we're line is we're keeping costs low. We don't have a big facility that we have to, pay, janitors to take care of it, and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
But we are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, which in America means a tax deductible nonprofit. And so we do receive donations from people who want to support our cause and then get a tax deduction.
Okay. Wow.
And the same with our clinic. Our practicum site is a tax deductible nonprofit community mental health center as well.
Okay. Okay. So we've talked a lot about training.
Yeah.
In the people are in graduate school, internship, that sort of framework. What about, when you're training, there is a program, right? There is some infrastructure designed that has resources to set you up and do all these things. But then when you're out in the real world, most people either in private practice or working for an organization, they don't, any infrastructure they would have to create themselves, or, it's just,
yes.
How do you conceptualize this? Or maybe conceptualize isn't the right word, because the conceptualization of what deliberate practice is the same, but actualize it or help people actualize it in the real world.
Can I be blunt?
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard on multiple levels. On one level, therapists are, at the most basic level, therapists are paid for time in the chair. We're not paid for results. If you're in private practice, there's a little bit of paid for results, but you'll have clients stick around for 20 years who aren't even getting better. And so even in private practice, the results is loosely connected with the pay. If you work for a large agency, you're definitely not paid for results. You're just paid for time in the chair. You're paid for the service delivered. And so there's a fundamental alignment problem in terms of incentives right there. Second of all, if you work hard to get better, the license board doesn't care. When I got licensed, 100% of my clients that I had seen in my practicum could have deteriorated. Mm-hmm. As long as my supervisor signed my paperwork, I would get licensed. I could have sent them my outcome data. They would have been like, "Why are you sending us this? We have no idea what to do with this." Imagine in baseball hiring players without seeing their scores, their statistics. Imagine hiring an artist without seeing their work. Imagine hiring a pilot without it's unthinkable, right? Theoretically, even CIA operatives working under deep cover, someone somewhere has notes on their performance. You know what I mean? Right. Not therapists. There's no record of performance in any way.
And I think anybody who's taken the EPPP knows that, if the EPPP is anything, it's a measure of IQ, conscientiousness, but
it's a measure of test preparation.
Yeah, I'd love to see the correlation between that and therapist effectiveness.
It's completely uncorrelated, and
so it could be negative. It might be negative.
If anything, if I was to predict, it would be nothing or negative, and so there's also issues of accessibility. How accessible is the field? Because the more money you have, the more you can use it for test prep and this and that and the other thing. While if you're, low income, it's harder to jump through all these hoops we've erected to become a therapist that unfortunately have very little to do with actually being an effective therapist. So, this is what we are trying to, I don't want to say we're trying to fix this because, there's also this culture issue, which is most therapists have never seen themselves on video or maybe once or twice in training. And so they will go 10, 20, 30 years without seeing their own work. And what does that do? That creates a very fragile ego because you're supposed to be good at what you're doing, but you've never actually seen your own work. You've never gotten feedback on your work. And so typically people just get more and more insecure. And you'll see this when I go do presentations at conferences, I'll ask for live volunteers for a demonstration of deliberate practice. And I prefer to have trainees. And the reason is trainees do not have ego around their work. They're trainees. They can show a mistake and they're like, "I'm a trainee. I have no idea what I'm doing." But if you have a volunteer who's been a therapist for 20 years, they don't want to show their mistakes in front of a bunch of colleagues, particularly medical residents. If I'm at a grand rounds, I won't even ask for volunteers because there's a culture of you do not show your mistakes in front of other people. Yeah, to develop this whole routine where I show my mistakes so they can give me feedback because so it's safer for them. So they get to be the expert. And so there's a major culture change has to happen in our field. And I think Scott Miller's written a lot about this. Rod Goodyear has written a lot about this. Bruce Wampold, John Fredrickson. There's a lot of people who have written about it, but it is not an easy lift. And this culture has to change site by site by site. Like you said, what if someone's working at a certain site and they want to start doing deliberate practice? They have to my advice is to go in, identify other people who have the same drive and feel comfortable being vulnerable, and model it yourselves. Don't ask anyone else to do it first. Model it, show that it's safe, show that it's helpful, and then gradually people will join.
Mm-hmm. So let's just
can I give one more example? So when I have a new supervision group of trainees, I always start the first supervision group by showing a video of me making a mistake. I have a video of me, and this is not from when I was a trainee. This is from when I was a licensed therapist. And I just did really bad therapy. I mean, it's hard to watch how bad it is. I was learning a new therapy model. I was screwing it all up. I was focusing on the model instead of the client. And it was just really bad. And the client dropped out. It's not like, oh, it all ended up for the best. The client left. And I show that video to the trainees. And I say, I want to show you this. In part because I don't want to ask you to do anything I won't do. We all show mistakes. It's safe to show mistakes. But also to show, like, I wasn't a trainee. This will be an issue throughout your whole career. We will make mistakes throughout our whole career. And this is ideally a lifelong learning process we engage in. And so I want to show you this video, and I want you to tell me, what am I doing wrong in this video? And we spend time with them giving me supervision, just to kind of create a culture of safety. We call this a failure-facing culture.
So let's say that I work at a clinic and there's 6 of us, and the 6 of us are close, and we decide, hey, we really want to we read some of your work and we get inspired, and like it's consistent with our ethos and our comfort with each other. And these are people who are truly bought in, and they come to you and they say, hey, Tony, so we really want to do this, but we don't know, like we kind of don't know where to start.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I would honestly say start at our YouTube site. And it's all free. We're not making any money off this. This is completely free. So this is not, some kind of scam or anything. But here, I'll send you the link. And the reason I would start here is to see what it's like. And you'll see many people doing many different demonstrations of deliberate practice. And so you can kind of look through them and get a feel, what do you want to try? Because there's all these different varieties we've talked about today. Now, and look for where are people's motivation. Deliberate practice relies on inherent motivation. You're not getting paid more to do this. You're not going to get any awards for doing it. You're not going to get your clients won't know, no one will know. So it's got to be inherent motivation. And then pick the method of deliberate practice that you want to do and start doing it with people that want to do it. Now, we've got a ton of free resources on our website where people can use our resources. We've got the book series. Scott Miller has stuff. John Fredrickson. So there's Bruce Wampold has a web service called Skill Setter, which is great. There's you can use ChatGPT, like you were saying. That's great. You can ask it to practice off it, but try to do it and then try to show yourself doing it to the other people at the site. So you're not trying to convince them, you're kind of showing them. And model vulnerability, let them see the benefits, and give them time. And for some of them, it might be a few months. For some of them, it might be a few years to come around and say, I want to try this.
So if you're the individual practitioner and you're you sort of want to do this, want to devote some of your time to this, it does seem like one of the plays, although they're not necessary, one of the plays would be to try to find a colleague, either at your site or another site, to who that you can show, but then perhaps bring them into the fold so that the two of you can work on it together.
Yes. Highly motivated colleague who ideally is comfortable feeling vulnerable. The thing is we're all in this together. When I started writing about my mistakes, at first I was nervous. And then I very quickly am like, look, I'm writing about everyone. Like, we're all making these mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, your mistakes might be slightly different than mine, but we're all making mistakes. And we're all nervous about it. And so just to kind of be okay with that. And what we find is that when we start showing our mistakes, everyone's anxiety goes down because we don't have to pretend to be perfect anymore.
I'm thinking too about, the average therapist, that they have, this would be sort of a conservative way that they would say, every once in a while they're going to say, oh, I had a session today and it just went terribly.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of therapists, they don't know where to go with that.
Yeah.
It just sucked.
Yeah.
And like they're very self-critical, and they're sort of self-critical in the broad, it's a bit ephemeral in terms of what it is that they actually struggled with. So I think perhaps this sort of way of thinking could allow people a way to take the session, do their best to decompose what they felt like they were really inept at or really struggled at. Identify that and work on that specific skill.
We call it growth edge. What's their growth edge? Okay. Now, sometimes they'll be able to identify it themselves, but often they will need to hire an expert supervisor to explain what their growth edge is. Mm-hmm. And that costs money. It's not easy to do, but I mean, that's typically how we improve, is we hire an expert to look at our video. And importantly, it really should be a video. Mm-hmm. Notes just don't, because we're not aware of what we're doing wrong. We can't write down in the notes and often when we watch videos with trainees, they're like, oh, I screwed this up. They actually did that part well. It's something else they messed up, right? And they can't be aware of it. It's not, I mean, if you think about it, if you were a painter, imagine getting better at painting by writing notes about your painting and showing the notes to the professor. And your notes are like, oh, my painting this week, I had a lot of red, and then the green was really thick. Do you think that was a mistake? Mm-hmm. Like, the professor would be like, I have no idea. I have to see the painting. And that's what therapy's like. It's very subtle. It's very nuanced. It's very emotional. And notes just can't capture it. There's no chance. And so, but show your videos to experts and get the feedback from the experts and try to get them to identify a micro skill. Now, this can be challenging because many experts are not taught to think in terms of micro skills. They're taught to think in terms of these big concepts, right? Like have a better alliance or, more congruence, and, all that is great, but it's vague. It's not very actionable. And ideally what we want is actionable micro skills that you can rehearse many times.
And so how do you help people actually figure out when they're watching a session, how to identify the micro skill?
We put them through a 1-year residency on how to learn how to do it.
And what's like this, like, give us just real quick, like what's the, like the
secret?
I'm trying, you didn't come up with the word.
There's a lot. I mean, the issue is there's a lot of things that go into it. And that's why it takes a year. So in our experience, it takes a year to really learn how to do it. And because you're not just identifying the micro skill, but you're first of all resisting the constant pull to just talk instead of rehearse. The trainee is typically asking you questions about 100 other skills, which are all very important. And so you're constantly facing this temptation to be distracted, to talk about something else. There's all kinds of other internal processes which we have to help supervisors deal with. And then you have to figure out how to operationalize the skill, which is often not easy. You then have to work within the student's zone of proximal development. Mm-hmm. If it's too hard for them, it's not going to help, even if it's the right skill. If it's too easy, it's not going to help as well. You then want to give them the right amount of feedback the right corrective feedback. And we found supervisors err towards more positive feedback, like saying like, oh, that's very helpful, that's great, you're doing great. That's actually not helpful. We found that trainees' anxiety goes up with the positive feedback. Their anxiety goes down when the supervisor says, no, you said that wrong. Here's how to say it right. Because the trainees know they're doing something wrong. They just want to know what it is.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole art to feedback that we provide. There's a whole art to how much rehearsal, when to move on to another skill. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So we found it takes about a year to learn how to do it.
And that it's interesting you say that the students will really focus on a lot of other stuff. And that's something that I've definitely found in teaching, so for the one basic skills course I teach, we use the Clara Hill book.
Yeah.
And so she has very explicit skills, and we follow the book very much so. So they're working on very specific things. She's great. Yeah. And one of the, it doesn't matter how many times I say it in class, they're always saying, yeah, but what about this? And what about, it's like, and I tell them, and we don't, the grade is not based on how good of a therapist they are. It's like, are they using the skill? That's really it. Are they using the skill? And I'm throughout the whole semester, I constantly say, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Clara Hill is another mentor of mine. We've done research together, and her book is excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that. And look, it's natural that the trainees want to know all these things. Like, of course they want to know. They want to help people, right? They became therapists because they want to help people. And when you're practicing baseball, you want to win the game. You don't want to just practice the one move. But the way you win the game is practicing the hard moves. And so it's frustrating. It's challenging. It's much easier to sit there and talk about 100 other things rather than rehearse. It takes discipline. A discipline that has frankly been lacking in our field.
So one thing I wanted to ask you before we end is, so we sort of started talking about outcome research, but we've really moved into micro skill practice. So, some of the literature on like micro skills correlation with outcome is a little bit tenuous or even lacking in terms of the research that's out there or how it's done. I think that some of the responsiveness work that's happening now, I had Bill Stiles on, and I think he's, one of the leaders in that area. And really, I think that's a really great framework. But I'm curious about how you approach or think about the micro skills and their link with outcome, because I think we would more or less all agree that at the end of the day, what matters is, am I helping my client?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm putting another link in the chat. This is, every time we see a new study on deliberate practice, we put it on this page. And there's been dozens at this time. And the research is still preliminary. There have been a number of studies that are showing improved skills with rehearsal, with deliberate practice. And then there's some studies that are mixed, and then there's meta-analyses that say, okay, what we really need is more studies.
And I just want real fast for the listener, and I will link all of these many links, but this page is it's basically a really long web page with just citations, some of which have brief, it's basically like APA style-ish citations to research on deliberate practice.
Yes.
So there's got to be somewhere between 50 and 100. I don't know, a big number of.
If anyone is doing research or paper or a thesis on deliberate practice, start here. Because we've done your literature review for you.
This is a fantastic resource.
We did it for you. And it's not hallucinated. If you ask ChatGPT to do it, it might hallucinate it. So start here. This is a new field. Our field has only really started exploring deliberate practice in, the past decade or so. And, other fields, it took musicians hundreds of years to figure out how to practice. It's taken athletes a long time to figure out how to practice. We're at the very beginning of this. In no way do I want to suggest that the way we do it is the right way to do it. Not at all. We are experimenting. Scott Miller's experimenting. Bruce Wamble, Clara Hill, everyone's experimenting. And over time, we will discover what is the best way to rehearse psychotherapy. And I might not be alive when that final discovery is made. That's okay. I'm at peace with that. So there's a lot more research needs to be done. But I 100% agree with you. The bottom line is, are the clients getting better? is the outcome data improving? And that is hard to do because the majority of the variance in client outcome is at the client level, right? And so what the therapist is doing matters, but it's not the whole story. And so you need these large end studies, and you need ideally longitudinal data. There's a whole bunch of things. We are starting to do that data. We've just started publishing our outcome data, and but it's very preliminary. And I would encourage everyone to be skeptical. We should all be skeptical of new research and we should push at it. We should not take anything for granted, and we should be constantly examined. The bottom line is, are the clients improving? And that's why we are using outcome data with all of our clients, because no matter what great ideas we get excited about, the bottom line is, are the clients improving?
Right. So we've talked about some pushback that you've gotten. I always like to ask people at the end if there's any, like, other than what we've talked about, is there any other pushback that you've gotten for your work?
Yeah, I mean, the most common pushback is, it's reductionist. You're taking something that is, I've had narrative therapists at a conference once say it's very top down. It's very expert based, right? So there's a number of postmodern models of therapy, like narrative therapy, where they're trying to deconstruct this whole concept of the therapist being an expert. And really, the client should be the expert in their own story. I love narrative therapy. I did, or at least I tried doing narrative therapy in grad school. And I mean, the way I answer that is, sure, I found that getting out of the expert seat as the therapist was not easy to do, because many clients were trying to pull me into that seat. And how do you get better at getting out of the expert seat? You practice it. So no matter what you're doing, sooner or later, you're doing something. And the idea that you should just be born good at it is crazy. Like, find a way to rehearse it. Now, you don't have to rehearse it our way. You find your own way of rehearsing it, that's fine. And if it's better, let us know, and we'll start using your way of rehearsing. But so that is the most common piece. The second is one that you've raised, which is, this is a great idea, but it's not practical. I don't have time, I don't have money, I don't have energy, and that's legitimate. I don't really have an answer to that. Until our work is incentivized by performance, it's hard to ask people to work harder to get better.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. No,
go ahead.
You go, Tony.
I mean, the one answer to that I've found is, most people join the field because they want to help people. They actually want to be good at helping people. People don't become therapists to become rich or famous. They want to help people. And so most of us have this burning drive. When we are not helpful, we go home and we're like, oh, how could I help that person? And so to try to tap into that and find a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, that if a person were to acquire the skill where they were able to identify the micro skills that they want to focus on, that if a person put an hour a week into it.
Oh, that's a lot. We don't need an hour a week, 20 minutes.
Right. So I think perhaps the hardest part is either you or getting with someone who can help, that you can work together to identify micro skills.
That's the second hardest part.
Oh, what's the first hardest part?
Vulnerability.
Okay. And to an extent, there are some people who are just more comfortable with that. Right. And so there are some people who would just be more willing to be vulnerable, and that those are probably going to be the people who are going to be self-starters, right, with this stuff.
And this is why we think it's important to start trainees with this right away.
Right, because you just
internalize it. Our trainees are used to, they see 5 hours of their own videos a week. I mean, they're just, it's what they do. And
it's in the air. It's just what we do. It's just what we do, right? Because we do all sorts of really hard stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just a part of the job, so you just do it.
Yeah.
But this isn't. We aren't acculturated into this is part of the job.
Yeah.
So that's what you're trying to do, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's a culture change, and that takes time. So yeah.
So are there any? We've hit a lot. Is there anything else that we've missed that you want to make sure that we touch on?
I mean, this is, you're good at your job. You run a good
This
podcast.
is my hobby. This isn't my job.
Well, you're good at your hobby. So no, I think we've covered. The only thing I would touch on is to check out some of the links so viewers can see it for themselves. And that's generally when questions start showing up. We've got a lot of recorded webinars that people can go through, and so it can kind of come to life and then explore from there.
Yeah, and I think so. All of the links that Tony's given to me over this conversation, I'm going to include in the show notes. Are there any other? And I do want to highlight again. Tony touched on it briefly, but he was part. And I don't know if those are still ongoing, but a series of books through APA.
Yeah.
That it's like deliberate practice for.
Yeah.
Boom, and then there's. I mean, it's a bunch of books you guys have put out.
Yeah. I think we're coming up on 20 by the end of this year.
Holy hell, that's a lot. So they're still coming out.
They're still coming out, yeah.
So I think that if somebody wants a book when they have a particular approach that they're primarily using or using a lot of, I think that would probably be a good resource for folks.
Yeah.
To get started. Are there any other links or resources to your work or what you guys are up to that you want me to include that we haven't already?
This is the last link I would leave you with. We call it our innovation lab, and this is actually a list of links to everything else we've talked about, plus a lot more that I didn't want to overwhelm the audience. So there's a lot more in here, and this is particularly useful for supervisors, faculty, for trainers to use. It's all free to use. Everything linked in here is free to use in your own courses, your own supervision. You could your own workshops, what have you. So our goal is to have many different independent sites around the world experimenting with deliberate practice. Our field has something of a guru problem where we can end up with these pyramids where there's one person at the top kind of controlling the whole thing. And we don't think that's healthy for the field. And so we want to, so far deliberate practice has been different. There's a lot of different groups and individuals experimenting in different ways around the world. And hopefully that'll continue, because that will lead us over time to the fastest, kind of the best, most efficient way to figure out what is actually working.
Great. Well, Tony, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. This has been wonderful. And for those watching on YouTube, you can see Tony has a beautiful collection behind him. That is definitely, but thank you, Tony. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this.
Well, thank you, Dan. Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Thanks so much for watching. If you found it helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video where we continue exploring the science of psychotherapy and applied psychology.